The bell rang twice. A sharp, insistent jab that was entirely out of character for the muffled thud of packages or the metallic clatter of the mail slot. For 3 years, the sounds of the mail delivery had been the metronome of my solitary life, predictable and blessedly brief. A single ring meant a signature was required, something I avoided by ordering everything online with preemptive digital scrawls. A double ring was an anomaly. It was a deviation from the script, and my heart, a sluggish, hibernating thing, gave a nervous flutter. I was a painter, or, more accurately, I was a man who painted, a subtle but significant distinction. I didn't sell my work, didn't show it. I filled my small, inherited house with canvases that leaned against walls in dusty stacks, a chronicle of my own quietude. My life was a loop of brewing coffee, stretching canvas, mixing colors, and waiting for the low grumble of the mail truck. And waiting for him. His name was Marcus. I only knew this from a stray piece of junk mail addressed to resident that had his name scribbled on a sticky note attached to it. Wrong box, sorry. Marcus. He was my mail carrier. And, in the pathetic, secret cinema of my mind, he was the unwitting star. He was tall, with a frame that seemed compressed by the neat blue uniform, all solid shoulders and thick arms tanned by the sun. He had a jaw that could have been carved from granite and a spray of laugh lines around his eyes that appeared even when he was not smiling. He moved with an easy, unhurried economy, a man perfectly at home in his own body. I was a man who often felt like a nervous tenant in mine. And he was, I had long ago decided, painfully, hopelessly straight. I'd seen a woman, a pretty blonde, pick him up from his route once in a shiny red SUV. They had kissed, a quick, casual peck that nonetheless felt like a door slamming shut 1,000 miles away. So I cataloged my observations, my 30-second daily glimpses of him, and filed them away in the vault of impossible things. He was a study in light and form, the subject of a dozen unfinished portraits I kept turned to the wall. The bell rang twice again. Impatient now, I wiped my paint-stained hands on a rag, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. I pulled on a reasonably clean sweatshirt over my paint-spattered t-shirt and padded to the door. I peered through the peephole, the fisheye lens distorting him, making him seem both closer and more unreal. There he was, his blue uniform shirt, the dark stripe down the leg of his trousers, the heavy-duty boots. He was not holding a package. His hands were empty, resting on his hips. He looked expectant. My own hand trembled as I turned the deadbolt. The click was unnaturally loud in the silent house. I opened the door a crack, my body instinctively hiding behind it. "Leo," he asked. His voice was just as I'd imagined it from a distance, a low, pleasant rumble, like stones shifting underwater. The fact he knew my name sent a secondary shock through me. Of course he knew my name. He delivered my mail. My God, I was an idiot. Yes. My own voice was a croak. He offered a small, slightly crooked smile. The laugh lines deepened. "Sorry to bother you." Weird question. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something that was not complete, unflappable confidence. A hint of nervousness. I'm on my break. Usually I grab a sandwich at the deli down on Main, but they're closed today. Some kind of plumbing disaster. I just stared, my brain refusing to process the information beyond plumbing disaster. Anyway, he continued, rubbing the back of his neck. The gesture pulled the fabric of his sleeve tight against his bicep. I forced my eyes back to his face. I was wondering. "Well, you've got that nice bench on your porch. Would you mind if I just sat here for 15 minutes? To eat my lunch, he held up a brown paper bag I hadn't noticed before. I can be quiet as a mouse. Won't bother you at all. My porch. He wanted to be on my porch. 10 feet from where I stood, separated only by a wall. The idea was both terrifying and intoxicating. All my carefully constructed barriers were being threatened by a brown paper bag and a plumbing issue. "Oh," I said. It was the only word I could manage. He seemed to take my stunned silence for hesitation. "No worries if not. I can just eat in the truck. It's just it gets stuffy in there, you know." "No, it's fine." I blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. "The bench. Yes, of course." His smile widened, relief washing over his features. "Thanks, man. I appreciate it." I nodded, unable to speak, and started to close the door. "Hey, Leo." I froze, my hand on the doorknob. You, want to join me? He gestured with the bag again. I've got an extra bag of chips, salt and vinegar. And that was it. That was the moment the world tilted. He was not just asking for a place to sit. He was asking for my company. My brain went into overdrive, a frantic search for motives. Was he lonely? Bored? Was this some elaborate prank? Or, the most dangerous thought of all, was he interested? I squashed that last one immediately. No, he was just being friendly. A kind, straight mail carrier making a polite gesture to the weird recluse on his route. I should say no. I should retreat back into my fortress of solitude and wet paint. It was safe there. It's just 15 minutes, he said, his voice soft, coaxing. His eyes, a warm hazel I'd only ever tried to capture with burnt umber and yellow ochre, held mine. My carefully built walls crumbled to dust. Okay, I heard myself say. Yeah, okay. So began the strangest, most nerve-wracking ritual of my life. That first day, I sat on the far end of the white-painted wooden bench, a good 3 feet of space between us. I was acutely aware of every sound, the crinkle of his sandwich paper, the crisp snap of him opening a can of soda, the rhythmic crunch of my own salt and vinegar chips. I was so tense I thought my teeth might crack. He did most of the talking. He talked about the heat, the absurdity of some people's mailboxes, a dog on Elm Street that had a personal vendetta against his truck's tires. It was all mundane, everyday stuff, but hearing it from him, watching the way his mouth formed the words, was mesmerizing. I learned that he had worked this route for 5 years. He liked being outdoors. He did not like junk mail any more than the rest of us did. I, in return, offered monosyllabic answers and tight, infrequent nods. I was a terrible conversationalist, my social muscles atrophied from disuse. My mind was a roaring torrent of observations. The scent of him was clean, like laundry, soap, and sunshine, with an undercurrent of something uniquely masculine, a faint, warm musk. The dark hair on his forearms was dusted with golden highlights from the sun. There was a small, faded scar that ran from his left knuckle to his wrist. I wanted to ask about it. I wanted to trace it with my finger. I wanted to run back inside my house and lock the door. So, you're an artist? He asked, gesturing with his half-eaten sandwich toward my house. I see the lights on in that front room all the time, even late. My heart seized. He'd been noticing me. He'd been looking at my house. I paint. I managed, the words feeling inadequate. Yeah? Anything good? He grinned, a playful glint in his eye. Mostly just things. What a brilliant, articulate response. I could feel a hot flush creeping up my neck. Things, he repeated, his grin softening into a gentle smile. I'd like to see your things sometime. The 15 minutes were up all too soon. He meticulously gathered his trash, folding the paper bag into a neat, small square. Well, back to the salt mines, he said, standing up and stretching. His uniform shirt rode up, exposing a tantalizing strip of tanned skin and the dark line of hair above his waistband. I averted my eyes, feeling like I'd stolen something. Thanks again, Leo. For the bench. And the company. Anytime. I mumbled, my gaze fixed on a crack in the porch floorboards. How about same time tomorrow? He asked. I looked up, startled. The deli will be open tomorrow. Yeah, I know, he said, his gaze steady. But their benches aren't as nice. And they don't come with company. And so it became a routine. Every day, Monday through Saturday, at precisely 12:15, Marcus would ring my bell twice. I would join him on the porch. The 3 feet of distance between us on the bench slowly shrank. First to 2 feet, then to 1, then to a comfortable, charged few inches. The conversation grew easier. I learned he was single. The woman with the red SUV had been his sister. He learned that I had grown up in this house, that I'd inherited it after my parents moved to Florida. One afternoon, a week or so into our new ritual, our knees brushed. It was nothing, a simple accident as he shifted to get his wallet from his back pocket. But to me, it was an electric shock. A jolt of heat shot straight through me, and I had to physically stop myself from flinching away. I glanced at him, my heart hammering. He didn't seem to notice. Or if he did, he gave no sign. He just continued his story about a package that had been addressed to a Mr. Woofles, presumably a dog. But after that, the touches seemed to happen more often. A light tap on my arm to emphasize a point. His fingers brushing mine when he passed me a napkin. His shoulder pressing against mine for a long moment as we both leaned back against the house. Each touch was a tiny spark, and I was a tinderbox, terrified of the inferno they might ignite. I spent my nights replaying every moment, dissecting every word, every glance. I was an archaeologist excavating the ruins of a 10-minute conversation, searching for artifacts of meaning. Was his lingering gaze just friendly interest, or was it something more? Was the warmth in his voice just his natural disposition, or was it reserved for me? My painting suffered. I couldn't focus. Every time I picked up a brush, my mind would drift to the way the sun caught the gold in his hazel eyes, or the sound of his low laugh. I started a new canvas, and without conscious thought, I began to paint him. Not his face, not directly. It was his hands, his strong, capable hands, resting on the worn denim of his knee. I painted the calluses, the faint scar, the way the light fell across his knuckles. It was the most honest thing I had ever painted. One particularly hot Tuesday, the air thick and syrupy with humidity, Marcus arrived looking flushed and weary. "It's a furnace out there," he sighed, collapsing onto the bench and fanning himself with a handful of envelopes. "Would you like a glass of water? Or iced tea?" I offered, the words feeling bold on my tongue. His eyes lit up. "Iced tea sounds like heaven. You sure it's no trouble?" "No trouble at all," I said, already moving toward the door, my heart doing a little flip. This was a new frontier. He was coming inside. I frantically scanned the living room as I walked to the kitchen. It was a disaster zone of canvases, some facing the wall, some not. Paint tubes littered the coffee table. A half-finished drawing of his profile was sitting right on the easel. My blood ran cold. I returned with 2 tall glasses of iced tea, condensation already beating on the sides. I found him not on the porch, but standing in the middle of my living room, his mailbag slung over his shoulder. He was looking at the painting on the easel, the drawing of his profile. Silence. My throat closed up. I couldn't breathe. This was it. The end. He would see it, be creeped out by the weird, obsessive artist, and he would never speak to me again. The 12:15 breaks would be over. The small patch of sunlight in my gray life would be extinguished. He turned slowly, his face unreadable. He looked from the drawing to me, then back to the drawing. I stood frozen, holding the 2 glasses of tea, waiting for the verdict. "You're really good," he said, his voice quiet, almost reverent. I blinked. "What?" "This," he said, gesturing to the easel. "It's really good. The lines. I don't know anything about art, but it feels alive." He took a step closer to it, his head tilted. "Who is it?" Relief and panic warred within me. He didn't recognize himself. "Just a study," I mumbled, finally moving forward and offering him a glass. From a photograph, it was a lie, but it was a necessary one. He took the glass, his fingers brushing mine. This time, the touch felt different. It was deliberate. His gaze held mine for a fraction of a second too long. "Well," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "He's a lucky guy. He didn't sit on the porch that day. He sat on my sofa, right in the heart of my cluttered, private world. He drank his iced tea and looked at my paintings, the ones I had not hidden. He asked questions, not just about technique, but about what I was trying to say. He saw the loneliness in my landscapes, the yearning in my still lives. He saw me. And as he was leaving, standing in the doorway, he paused. "You know, Leo," he said, his eyes serious. "You shouldn't hide these. They're beautiful." He was looking at the canvases stacked against the wall, but it felt like he was talking about something else entirely. It felt like he was talking about me. The dynamic had shifted. The porch was no longer our primary meeting spot. More often than not, our breaks were spent inside, in my living room, with the scent of turpentine and iced tea mingling in the air. The boundary between his world and mine was dissolving. The tipping point came on a Saturday. I was on my porch, sketching in a notepad, when old Mrs. Gable from across the street shuffled by on her afternoon walk. She was the neighborhood watch, a one-woman surveillance state with a tiny, perpetually yapping poodle. "Good afternoon, Leo," she called out, her sharp eyes flicking from me to Marcus, who was leaning against the porch railing, sipping a Coke. "Afternoon, Mrs. Gable," I replied politely. "So lovely to see you spending time with your friend," she said, the word friend loaded with insinuation. Her gaze was frankly appraising. I felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. I was about to offer some sort of mumbled, non-committal reply, but Marcus spoke first. He pushed himself off the railing, a lazy, confident smile spreading across his face. He walked over to me, and in a move that nearly stopped my heart, he casually draped his arm across the back of my chair, his fingers brushing the nape of my neck. "He's the best," Marcus said to Mrs. Gable, his voice warm and certain. "Keeps me sane on this route." Mrs. Gable's eyebrows shot up into her hairline. She gave a tight, pursed-lipped smile, a small, scandalized harumph, and then tugged on her dog's leash, continuing on her way at a slightly brisker pace. The moment she was out of earshot, the world seemed to rush back in. Marcus's arm was still there. His fingers were a brand of heat on my skin. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. He finally removed his arm, and the absence of his touch was a physical ache. He went back to leaning on the railing, taking a slow sip of his drink as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just casually, publicly, staked some sort of claim. My mind was racing. Why had he done that? To shut her up? As a joke? Or was it a test? A signal? After a long, charged silence, I found my voice. It was barely a whisper. "Why did you do that?" He turned to face me, his expression serious. He didn't pretend not to know what I was talking about. Old Lady Gable needed her wings clipped. "But you let her think." I trailed off, unable to say the words. "Think what?" he asked, his voice low. He was looking at me intently, his hazel eyes searching mine. This was not a casual question. It was a loaded one. Every nerve in my body was screaming. This is it. This is the moment. That we're... He took a step toward me. "That we're what, Leo?" he pressed, his voice softer now, more intimate. "That I enjoy spending my break with you more than anywhere else. That I think about you when I'm sorting mail at 5 in the morning. That I lie awake wondering what color you're mixing, what you're creating in this house all by yourself." My breath hitched. My carefully constructed world, my safe assumptions, my years of quiet pining, it was all shattering. He was saying the things I had only dared to dream. "Did it bother you?" he asked, his voice barely audible now. He was so close I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. What she thought? I shake my head. I can't speak. All I can do is look at him, my heart in my throat, my answer in my eyes. He takes another step. He is right in front of me now. I have to tilt my head back to look up at him. He reaches out, not quickly, but with a slow, deliberate motion, and his hand comes to rest on the side of my neck, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin just below my ear. The touch is gentle, questioning. It sends a shiver down my entire spine. "Good," he whispers, because it didn't bother me at all. The rest of the day passed in a surreal haze. He had to finish his route. He left with a simple, "See you later," but the words were imbued with a new weight, a promise. I didn't paint. I couldn't. I just paced my house, from the cluttered living room to the quiet kitchen, his touch still phantom warm on my neck. I replayed his words over and over. "Did it bother you?" The question echoed in the silent rooms. He hadn't just been asking about Mrs. Gable. He had been asking about everything. About us. Doubt, my old and constant companion, began to creep in. Maybe I had misread it all. Maybe it was just his way of being a good, supportive friend. Maybe he was just exceptionally perceptive and kind. The straight mail carrier, being nice to the lonely gay artist. My mind spun, weaving intricate webs of fear and self-protection. It was safer to believe I had imagined it. Evening fell, painting the sky in shades of violet and rose that I would normally be desperate to capture on canvas. Tonight, I barely noticed. I was making a pretense of eating dinner, a bowl of cereal I had no appetite for, when I heard a sound. Not the doorbell this time, but a soft knock on the doorframe. I looked up. He was standing there. Marcus, not in his uniform, but in a plain gray t-shirt and worn jeans. His hair was damp, as if from a recent shower. He held a six-pack of beer in one hand, the cardboard cool and dark. He looked younger without the uniform, less like a public servant and more like just a man standing on my doorstep after the sun had gone down. "My route's over," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. He offered a small, hesitant smile, but I was thinking my break isn't. I just stared at him, my spoon frozen halfway to my mouth. He was here. He had come back. "Can I come in?" he asked, his gaze earnest. I nodded, a slow, dumbfounded movement of my head. He stepped inside, placing the beer on the cluttered coffee table. The house suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker, charged with a palpable energy. He didn't seem to know what to do with his hands, first shoving them in his pockets, then pulling them out again. The easy confidence he projected during the day was gone, replaced by the same nervous energy I felt churning in my own stomach. I hope this is okay, he said, gesturing vaguely around the room. Me just showing up. It's okay, I said, my voice hoarse. I finally put my cereal bowl down. He opened 2 beers, the hiss of the caps breaking the silence. He handed one to me, his fingers brushing mine. The familiar spark was there, but this time it was a slow-burning fire. We sat on the sofa, the same way we had before, but now there was no pretense of a 15-minute break. There was no uniform, no mailbag. There was just the deepening twilight outside, the smell of my paint-filled house, and the 2 of us. We drank in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the clink of glass against the table. The questions I was too afraid to ask hung in the air between us. Finally, he spoke, his eyes fixed on the bottle in his hands. I've been wanting to do this for a while. Do what? I asked, my heart pounding. Show up with beer. He looked up at me then, and his gaze was so intense it felt like a physical touch. No. Just being here. With you. Without the clock ticking, he took a breath. Leo, I'm not great with words. Not like you are with your paints. I see things, I feel things, but getting them to come out right is hard. My throat was tight. I just listened. These past few weeks, he continued, sitting out on that porch with you, it's been the best part of my day. Of my year. Maybe he let out a short, humorless laugh. I started looking forward to it so much it scared me. I'd be delivering a package 3 streets over, and I'd be thinking about whether you'd be wearing that sweatshirt with the green paint on the sleeve, or if you'd have that little smudge of charcoal on your cheek. He knew. He saw everything. All the little details I thought I was hiding. Emboldened by his confession, by the beer, by the raw, desperate need to finally know, I found my own courage. Marcus, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I have to ask. The woman, the blonde with the red SUV. A look of understanding dawned on his face. My sister, Claire, he said softly. She was helping me move out of my ex-girlfriend's place. That was a long time ago. In more ways than one inch, he looked down at his hands again. That relationship ending, it made me realize a lot of things. About what I thought I wanted, and what I actually needed. The air crackled. The last piece of my defense, the straight mail carrier label, had just been dismantled. He was not what I thought. He was something else. Something possible. What do you need? I whispered. He put his beer down with a decisive click. He turned his body to face me fully on the couch. The space between us was now impossibly small. He reached out, his hand cupping my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheek. His touch was firm, confident, erasing all my doubt. I think, he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. I'm looking right at him. And then he leaned in and kissed me. It was not like any kiss I had ever imagined. It was not a desperate, frantic thing. It was slow. It was tender. It was a question and an answer all at once. His lips were soft, warm, and they tasted faintly of beer and something else, something that was just him. It was a kiss of relief, a deep, soul-shaking exhalation after years of holding my breath. My hands, of their own accord, came up to rest on his chest, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart beneath my palms. He deepened the kiss, his other hand coming up to tangle in my hair, pulling me closer. The world narrowed to this single point of contact, this miraculous, impossible connection. When he finally pulled back, we just rested our foreheads together, breathing the same air. Took me long enough, huh? He murmured, a shaky laugh in his voice. I laughed too, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. I thought you were straight. Yeah, he said, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. I thought a lot of things. Turns out, I was just waiting for the right person to deliver the mail. I woke to the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, I thought I was dreaming. The scent was rich and dark, a smell of home, but it wasn't me who had made it. I opened my eyes. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in my blinds, striping the opposite wall. My wall. My bedroom. I was in my own bed. And I was not alone. Marcus was gone from the bed, but the indentation on the pillow next to me was still there, the sheets still warm from his body. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through me. He'd left. It was a mistake. A one-time thing. He'd woken up in the morning light, seen the cluttered reality of my life, and bolted. My heart, which had felt so full and light just hours before, plummeted. I sat up, the sheet pooling around my waist. The house was quiet except for the low gurgle of the coffee pot. I swung my legs out of bed, my feet finding the cool wood of the floor. I pulled on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, my movements stiff with anxiety. I had to know. I had to see the empty living room, the front door firmly shut, the evidence that last night had been a fleeting, beautiful dream. I walked out of my bedroom and into the hall. The living room was empty, just as I'd feared. The 2 beer bottles from last night were sitting on the coffee table, a sad little monument to what had happened. My chest ached. Of course, it was too good to be true. Then I heard a soft clink from the kitchen. I rounded the corner, my heart in my throat. And there he was. He was standing at my counter, shirtless, wearing just the jeans from last night. His back was to me, broad and tanned, the muscles shifting as he reached up to open a cabinet. He was looking for mugs. My mugs. In my kitchen. He seemed to sense my presence and turned. A slow smile spread across his face when he saw me. It was a soft, sleepy, unguarded smile. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Morning," he said, his voice husky with sleep. "I hope you don't mind. I figured you could use a coffee." I couldn't speak. I could only stare at him, this magnificent, impossible man, making coffee in my kitchen as if he belonged there. The panic receded, replaced by a wave of emotion so profound it almost brought me to my knees. He took 2 mugs down from the shelf, my favorite chip blue one for me, and a plain white one for himself. He poured the coffee, the dark liquid steaming in the morning light. He walked over to me and held out the blue mug. "I didn't know if you took cream or sugar," he said, his eyes searching my face, a hint of vulnerability in them. "Just black is perfect," I managed to say, my voice thick. I took the mug, and our fingers brushed. He didn't pull away. Instead, he let his hand linger, his thumb gently stroking the back of my hand. He held my gaze. "I wasn't planning on leaving," he said quietly, as if he had heard the frantic panic in my mind just moments before. "I just figured coffee." Relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. "Coffee is good," I whispered. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. We stood in the kitchen, drinking our coffee, the silence comfortable and full. It felt more intimate than anything that had happened the night before. This quiet, domestic moment felt real, solid. It was the start of something. A few weeks later, the rhythm of our lives had found a new, deeper cadence. The 12:15 breaks were still a part of our day, a cherished ritual, but they were no longer the main event. They were just one small piece of a much larger picture. My life, once a solo performance, had become a duet. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Marcus was at my house, not for a break, but just to be there. He had declared that my porch bench, the site of our beginning, was in a shameful state of disrepair. He had arrived with sandpaper, brushes, and a can of bright white paint. I sat on the porch steps, sketching him as he worked. He had taken his shirt off, and his back was gleaming with a light sheen of sweat in the afternoon sun. He moved with that same easy competence I had admired from afar for so long, sanding down the old, peeling paint with long, smooth strokes. I was no longer just an observer. I was a participant. Later, I would take a brush and paint alongside him, our shoulders bumping, our hands occasionally brushing as we reached for the same rag. The smell of fresh paint mingled with the scent of his skin, a new perfume for our shared space. Mrs. Gable walked by with her poodle, just as she always did. She saw us, working together, laughing as Marcus got a smudge of white paint on my nose. She looked from him to me, and for the first time, there was no judgment in her eyes. There was just a flicker of something that looked almost like a smile. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod and continued on her way. The test had been passed without a word being spoken. That evening, we sat on the newly painted, still slightly tacky bench, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. The air was cool, and a comfortable silence settled between us. Marcus's arm was around my shoulders, holding me close. My head rested against his chest, and I could feel the steady, reassuring thump of his heart. I looked around at my small house, at the porch where our story began, at the man sitting beside me. For years, this house had been a fortress, a place to hide from the world. My life had been a collection of muted grays and lonely blues. Marcus had walked into it and filled it with color, with warmth, with the scent of coffee in the morning. He turned his head and pressed a soft kiss to my hair. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. I tilted my head back to look at him. I saw the laugh lines around his eyes, the gentle curve of his mouth, the deep affection in his gaze. I thought about all the days I had watched him from my window, a lonely man pining for an impossible dream. I thought about the terror and hope of that first double ring of the doorbell. I thought about my journey from a passive observer of my own life to an active, joyful participant in his. "I'm thinking," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face, "that I feel like I'm home." He tightened his arm around me, pulling me impossibly closer. "Good," he whispered into the twilight. "Me too." And as the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was not an ending. It was the beginning of everything.